Okay, with Abish's help, we're going to start Nedarim Daf Nun Tes, Utes. So let us make Utes, Yat. So we're going to start from the Gemara on the bottom of the page, and then we're going to go to Daf Utes. But let's just review the Mishnah. Very important Mishnah over here. Yud Ches Amud Beis. There, the Mishnah says a rule. Stam nedarim lahachmir means that a neder that you left up to chance, you didn't define the neder, and that could go either way. A neder that you made a statement that you can translate either way. In one way, you can translate it that it's not a neder. In one way, you can translate it is a neder. So if you explain yourself, perushim lahakel. If you explain yourself, I didn't mean a neder, of course we trust you, and it's not a neder. But if you just you threw something out of your mouth and you didn't define it, so that's an undefined neder. We're going to go. You have to strict. You have to keep it as a neder. So the Mishnah gives you a number of examples. Okay. Hi, Mayor's just entering. So, hi, Mayor. We just began, Mayor. So the Mishnah is going to give you a number of examples. A man says, "Harei alai kibasam aliyah." A man says that this loaf of bread should be like salted meat. Now, salted meat could mean one of two things. Either it means like carbon meat, like the sacrifice that you bring in the Beis Hamikdash, and they always put salt on that meat before you brought it onto the Mizbeach. So if you say my loaf of bread should be like that salted meat, then we say that you meant that means that you meant the neder, and it's a good neder. But it also could mean that my loaf of bread should be like salted meat that are brought for idolatry, like salted meat that's brought as a sacrifice to an avodah zarah. In that case, if you associated your bread to be like that, then your neder is invalid, because a neder is only valid. We said this many times, that a neder is only valid only if you make an association to something that is usher through a vow. Like you say, my bread should be like a carbon. A carbon only becomes a carbon if you make it into a vow. But if you did not make it into a vow, if it's something like that Hashem said it's usher, for example, my bread should be like a piece of chazer, so then it's not a neder. Hi, Alan. We just began. We're just discussing what the Mishnah meant. Stam nedarim lahachmir. It means that if you don't define your neder, we're going to say that you meant strict. In other words, you left it up to whatever we decide. If you leave it up to what we decide, we're going to go strict. So the Mishnah says, if you say harei alai kibasam aliyah, if you said my loaf of bread should be like salted meat. So if you said bishel shalomim nadar, if you said my bread should be like salted meat of a shlamim, then of course it's usher. Then you took a valid neder, and your bread is usher to you. In bishel avodah zarah nadar, if you said my bread should be like salted meat of an avodah zarah, of a sacrifice brought to an avodah zarah, so that Hashem said that that sacrifice is usher, so that it's not really a davar hanader. It's not a good association, and therefore your neder is invalid, mutter. Then stam, and this is the point. If you didn't define whether you mean the salted meat of a shlamim, or you mean to associate your bread to the salted meat of an avodah zarah, we go strict and we go usher. We say it's usher. That's the Mishnah. And the Mishnah gives you continuous examples. For example, the Mishnah will say, let's say the Mishnah will say, harei olai kecherem. My bread should be like cherem, like something consecrated. Now, there are two types of consecrations. Sometimes you say something should be dedicated, let's say the word dedicated, to the Beis Hamikdash. I say there are certain things that you dedicate to the Beis Hamikdash as a gift, like a watch or something like you give a gift to the Beis Hamikdash. Sometimes you can say, cherem, I'm giving a gift to the Kohen, as a gift, a token, a tip. So if you said my bread should be like cherem, So im kecherem shel shemayim, if you meant like something that's dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, so then it's usher, because once something is dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, it becomes the property of Hegdish. So that's a good association for a neder, and therefore your bread is usher. Then kecherem shel kahanim. But if you said that I want my bread should be like something I dedicate to a Kohen, well, when you give something to a Kohen, it's it's like giving a gift to your friend. It's not a Hegdish per se. So then it's mutter. Bim stam. But if you didn't define yourself, you said harei like a cherem, and you didn't define. We asked you what you meant, and you said, you decide what I meant. And so then the Mishnah says, Aser will go strict. Okay? So therefore, we always go strict in a neder. If it's undefined, we go strict in a neder. So the Gemara begins on the Yitches Amud Beis. The Gemara asks a very simple question. But now we learned in the Mishnah, Safek Naziris Lahakil. If you have a doubt whether you took a Naziris or not, we can assume that it's a similar idea, where you're saying something of your mouth, which can be defined that you're taking upon yourself the Naziris vow or not the Naziris vow. The Mishnah says in Masechta Taharis that you go lenient, that you didn't mean to accept upon yourself the Naziris vow. So how could you reconcile our Mishnah with this Mishnah, Masechta Taharis, that says you go lenient? Our Mishnah says you go strict by a neder. Amar Rab Zera said, "Lo kasha, it's not difficult." Ha Rab Leza, ha Rabbanim. This is Rab Leza, and this is the Rabbanim. Why? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. So it's always easy to say that the authors of two different Mishnayos are two different people. So our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan, and that Mishnah that you go lenient goes according to Rab Leza. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Hamagdish Chayasei. Let's say a guy says, all my wild animals should be holy, and I'm dedicating it to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, it's a gift to the Beis Hamikdash. Or he says, all my domesticated animals, the behemtoi, should be dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash. So the Rabbanan hold Higdish es a koi. It means that if you have this called koi. Now, what is a koi? A koi is an animal. Let's get a picture up there that an animal that looks like this. Here, an animal that looks like this on the screen. It looks like a domesticated animal. You can see it looks like a sheep or the ram family, but it's a hybrid of a wild animal. So it's a cross between a wild animal, a chaya, and a behemoth. So the question is, if you said I only want to give my wild animals, is the koi, which is a doubt. Chachamim didn't know how to define that animal, so it's a doubt. The Rabbanim say you go strict. And that means that included in your dedication is this koi. So if you have a koi, even though the koi is not a defined, definite chaya, it's included in your dedication, and it also becomes holy. Rabbi Lezer says, no, lo higdish as a koi. We go lenient. You only gave holy what is definitively defined as a wild animal or a domesticated animal. Something that we're not sure if it belongs in this category or that category doesn't become holy. So therefore, now this is called you're dedicating your personal property. And Rabbi Lezer says you go lenient on your personal property. So man de Amma, according to the Rabbanan, who say you go strict, mamoina ma'aya l'sveika, that even your money you are putting into the suffix. You want to go strict with your money. In other words, when we say that you make a neder, you probably meant that even if we're not sure if to include it into your neder or not to include it in your neder, when it comes to your personal property, we say that you meant to include even the things that are in doubt into your neder, into your dedication. So therefore, that's why the koi is holy. So they would hold, or Rabbanan hold, gufei nami ma'ayel. When you take a personal vow on yourself, nothing to do with your personal property, you would also go into strictness and say that if we're in doubt what you meant, you don't mind if we go strict. And that makes sense, because if you think about it, why would a person say something out of his mouth and leave it undefined, and we're going to interpret it as lenient? He said it in a language that sounds like he wants to make a neder. So Rabbanan will hold that you go strict, and therefore our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan. According to the opinion, which is Rabbi Lezer, that when it comes to your personal property, we go lenient and we say, no, if you didn't define it, you don't mean to give it, and therefore the koi is not holy, and therefore we go lenient. So he will also hold gufe when it comes to your body, taking a restriction upon yourself, right? A vow upon yourself, or a vow upon your, let's say, your bread. Gufe also, you certainly don't put it into a suffix, and therefore, if you had a doubt whether you put upon yourself and Naziris, right, they will hold that you go lenient on the Naziris. So Rabbi Lezer will hold that suffix Naziris lahakel. That means if we're in doubt what you meant, then you really weren't committed to becoming a Nazir, and therefore Rabbi Lezer will hold we go lenient. Our Mishnah who says Stam Nedarim Lahachmir goes according to the Rabbanan. Okay? So the Gemara questions that, and the Gemara is going to come to the conclusion that you cannot say that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Elazar. Let's call him Rabbi Elazar. That's the correct girsa. Amalei Abaya challenges it. B'mai akimta l'sveik ziris lahakel. Who did you say the Mishnah of suffix naziris goes lenient? Who did you say that Mishnah goes according to? To Rabbi Elazar? According to Rabbi Elazar? So Ema Seifa. Let us take the end of that Mishnah. The end of that Mishnah says, Safit B'chayris. Let's say you have a doubt if you have a B'char. How do you have a doubt if it's your firstborn kid? Okay, let's say something happened let's say you had twins and you don't know which one was born first. That could happen. Or let's say you have an animal. Or let's say you have an animal that gave birth to also a male and a female. You don't know which one was first. So Safik B'chayris, Echad B'chayr Adam Echad B'chayr Behema. If you have a doubt whether it's the firstborn of a human, firstborn of an animal, Bein Tmeya Bein Tahira, whether it was a tummy animal like a donkey, which the firstborn again has to be gifted to the Kohen, or you could Petach Hamar Tifta B'seh, or Bein Tahira, or it's a kosher animal. Anyway, there's a doubt whether you owe the Kohen the first money, whether you owe the Kohen the 5 shekel. So Hamoitzi Mechaveira Olav Haraya. The Kohen can't prove who is the B'char. He can't prove whether you owe him money, right? You can't prove whether you owe him money. Let's say you don't know if it was a B'char. So therefore, you keep the money. You keep the animal. V'tana Allah, what we learned on a Braisa, this suffix b'harcha, this animal that you're not sure if it's a bechor or not, you should treat it like hegdish. You're not permitted to shave the animal's hair off or do any work with it. You have to treat it like a holy animal. Now, so therefore, we see that the end of the brisa goes strict. The end of the brisa goes strict. So how could you say that the beginning of the brisa goes according to Rabbi Lezer, and Rabbi Lezer holds you go lenient. When you have a doubt, you go lenient. So how come when it becomes Safik B'chayris, you go strict, and you say no, you got to treat it like a holy carbon. So this really is not a kasha because it just leads up to the next kasha. Amalei. So Abaya answered. They answered Abaya. Now who are we answering over here? Rab Zera. Right? So Rab Zera and Abaya are having a conversation. So Amalei, so Rab Zera answered, what kind of question are you answering me? Amai komadamas kedusha haba me'eleha l'kedusha haba b'dei adam. You can't compare this suffix b'chayris. Do you want to know why it goes strict? Because God made the doubt. In other words, the animal was born. Let's say an animal gave birth to a male and a female. You don't know if the male was born first or the female was born first. So if you have a doubt, who made that doubt? God gave you that doubt. Therefore, you have to go strict because that is a holiness that comes without your, involuntary. It's not something that you dedicated. It's something you're obligated to do. And therefore, if you're in doubt, therefore you should go strict. But l'kedusha haba b'dei adam. But if you're trying to sanctify yourself, for example, Naziris is something you're trying to make a vow upon yourself. And you're not sure if you meant Nazir or you didn't mean Naziris, you can't compare. There, you'll go lenient because we'll say that you weren't so committed to becoming a Nazir. and therefore you could go lenient. But when it's a doubt that God planted the doubt, then you have to go strict. So that's not a question from the Mishnah itself from the Mishnah at the beginning of the Mishnah to the end of the Mishnah. Ella, the Gemara is going to say like this: Ikasha hakasha. If you want to ask a question, I'm going to ask you a much difficult question. You just got through saying that the Rabbi Lazar is of an opinion that you should go lenient. When you're in doubt, go lenient, especially if you're the one making the commitment. And we're in doubt whether you made a strict, you were really committed for the vow or not. Rabbi Lazar holds you go lenient. So the Gemara says that maybe you could ask a very difficult question that Rabbi Lazar never holds you should go lenient. Why? Because there is a halacha in the Chumash. There's a pasuk in Chumash that says that. Let's read the pasuk in Chumash. The pasuk says right over here, "B'chol mashke asher yisoseh b'chol kli yitma," that any liquid in any vessel could become tamei. This is a pasuk in Shmini. Now, there is an opinion over here that what does that mean? Any vessel, water or liquid, could become tamei. So it's not sure. Does the Torah mean that liquids could become tamei, susceptible to tumah, or really? If a liquid touches, let's say, a sheretz or something like it, does not become tamei. So what does this mean? That a liquid could become tamei? A liquid makes other things susceptible to tumah. That means an apple, as long as you pick it off the tree and it never came in contact with liquid, it never could become tamei. And what the Chumash is saying is that only time a food item could become tamei is only if it touched water. Then it becomes susceptible to tumah, and that apple could become tamei. But liquid itself can never become tamei. So the Gemara is going to prove that Rabbi Lazar is of that opinion, and that liquids can never become tamei. But look at this pasuk. If there's a brisa that says sfeik mashkim, you have a doubt whether liquids became tamei. Let's say you have a liquid oil that belonged to a kohen. It's a liquid, and you're not sure if it became tamei, if a tamei touched it or not. Li tamei, whether it itself became tamei, we assume tamei, that it is tamei. If you're not sure if a tamei man touched the oil, we say that oil is tamei, and therefore the kohen who owns this truma oil cannot use it because it's tamei. We're going to assume that it's tamei. L'tamei acherim, if you want to say that other people become for that oil to be metame other foods, then we'll say it's tar. Then we'll say that it's actually a doubt. You don't know if this oil is tamei. It won't make anything else tamei. Divrei Reb Meir. So this is the words of Reb Meir. So safek maskin becoming susceptible to tumah, we go a little strict and we say that it itself is tamei. And when you say truma becomes tamei, the kohen can't use it anymore. He has to get rid of it. Rabbi Lazar agreed with Rab Meir that something in doubt, li tamei, is tamei. That a mashkin, if you have a suffix by mashkin, you say it's tamei. Now, the Gemara is going to ask a question. Now the Gemara leads to another question and gets back to our question. Umi svirule Rabbi Lazar li tamei tamei. Would Rabbi Lazar hold that suffix mashkin to accept tumah? Will you go strict and say it's tamei? But Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Lazar says, "Ein tuma lamashkin kol ikar." In Min Torah, liquids can never become tamei. And you would think about it. If Hashem made it that for a tamei to become tar, you go into a mikvah. So maybe liquids never could become tamei in the Torah, only midrabanan. And Rabbi Lazar says, "I'm of that opinion." Rabbi Lazar says, "I'm of that opinion. Liquids can never become tamei." Taida, I'll prove it to you. Shaharei hated Yosi ben Ye'ez Israeda al El Kamsa. Yosi gave a testimony, a tradition, that this El Kamsa, which is a type of grasshopper, bachon, it's permitted to eat that grasshopper. I'm not sure what that type of grasshopper it is, but it is a type of grasshopper that's kosher. But the point over here is, Val Mashkem Beis Midbachaya Dachon. He said liquids in the Beis HaMikdash are not susceptible to tamei. There's no, if let's say a sheretz touches, let's say the blood of an animal, of a carbon, it's tahar, because midoraisa liquids don't become tamei, and it's only midrabana. liquid can become tummy. And in the Beis Hamikdash, all drabanans pretty much are suspended because it became too, if you have every drabanan, it's very strict. So they went, all drabanans are suspended in the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, Rab Lazar holds all tumas mashkin are tahar. That's what he said. Now, it's not clear if that's what Rab Lazar meant, that all tumas mashkin are tahar, they don't even accept tumah. Because hanicha l'shmuel, if you learn the way Shmuel learned Rab Lazar, that when Rab Lazar said that in the Beis Hamikdash, mashkins are pure, it means not really pure. It could be mekabel toma, because Rab Lazar holds midaraisa, a mashkin could be mekabel toma, but it can't be metama others. Then everything makes sense, because it makes perfect sense that if you hold that a mashkin could become tamei midaraisa, I understand perfectly well why Rab Lazar will hold that since mashkin could become tamei midaraisa, that when you're in doubt, you go strict. But Rav learned Rab Lazar over here, the Ahmed Dochen Mamish, that in the Beis Hamikdash, there's no such a thing of a mashkin becoming tamei, because Rab Lazar, the way Rav interpreted Rab Lazar, he holds that this mashkin can never be mekabel tuma. The Torah says that mashkin has some tamei. It doesn't mean that it's tamei. It just prepares food items to become susceptible to tuma. But mashkin itself, liquid itself, can never become tamei. So Rav holds that Rab Lazar holds. Okay, so Rav holds that Rab Lazar holds that mashkin can never become tamei midaraisa. So at best, it's only a suffix d'Rabbanan, and yet by a suffix d'Rabbanan, Rab Lazar will go strict and say that you're tamei. So how could Rab Lazar be the author of our Mishnah and say by suffix naziris, which is a daraisa, he would hold that you go lenient and say suffix naziris lahakel? It can't be. If Rab Lazar likes to go midrabanan strict, then he should also go when it's a suffix daraisa by naziris, even though naziris is something you bring upon yourself. But still, if D'Rabbanan he's going strict, so even though it's min hashamayim, it's Hashem's deciding if it's tamei or it's D'Rabbanan. But still, if you're going by a D'Rabbanan strict, and you're going, if you have a doubt something of mashkin, you go strict, then suffix naziris he should also go strict. And so Rab Lazar cannot be the author of our Mishnah. Now, let me ask you a question. If Rab Lazar likes to go strict, then why by a kvi, the Rab Lazar said, you didn't be mekad? Why by this case, the Rab Lazar go lenient? By higdish esakoi, if you magdish just your wild animals, you didn't include the koi, which is a doubt which category it is. Because the answer could be that Rab Lazar will hold that a koi is a third category. You have wild animals, domesticated animals, and the koi, the hybrid animal. But it doesn't belong, it's not like a doubt whether it belongs into the wild animal category or the domesticated animal. It's a new creature for itself, undefined. So therefore, Rab Lazar went lenient over there. But normally, Rab Lazar goes strict, and therefore, Rab Lazar cannot be the author of the Mishnah of Safek Naziris Lahakel. So the Gemara is going to try to find very quickly who is the author of the Mishnah in Nazir. Allah, says the Gemara, new Gemara, Har Yehuda Rab Shimon, the author of that Mishnah, of the Mishnah in Nedarim is Rab Shimon. Rab Yehuda is the one that goes lenient. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa. A man says, Hareini Nazir. A man says, Hareini Nazir. I want to be a Nazir. You know how you try to guess how many gumballs are in the machine? So the same thing like this. A man says, I'm a Nazir. I'll take in this pile, may a kur. 100 pounds or 100 kur are in this pile of grain. And the other guy says, so that means we're not sure. So we have to count this pile to see if there is 100 kur, and then he becomes a Nazir. So then when you came to counting the pile, it was stolen or lost. So now you don't know if the guy is a Nazir or not. Maybe it had 100 kur, maybe it didn't. Rabbi Yehuda says matir. Rabbi Yehuda said he's not a Nazir. Why? Probably suffix nazaris nehakil. Rab Shimon says you go strict. So Rab Shimon says you go strict. So the author of our Mishnah that says Safek Nedarim is strict is Rab Shimon, and the author of the Brisa that says Safek Naziris, you go lenient, is Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara asks, the Rabbi Yehuda. But let me ask you a question, Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yehuda. If you're telling me that Rabbi Yehuda goes lenient, so therefore, me Amar Rabbi Yehuda, you must be saying that Rabbi Yehuda says, a person doesn't want you to define him strict. In other words, a person doesn't want to bring himself into a doubt. In other words, that if he's saying a neder, he wants you to go lenient. And if you're doubt, go easy on him. The Raminu, I'll ask you a contradiction. In our Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Yehuda said, Stam Trumim Yehuda, Stam Truma Yehuda Asura, Uba Galil Muteris. That sometimes if you say, my loaf of bread should be like Truma. Now, Truma has one of two connotations. Truma is the Truma that you give to a Kohen. And if you associate your bread to the Truma that you give to a Kohen, then that's not a neder, because the Truma is considered like associating to a piece of chazer. It's a davar ha'aser. Hashem said a non-Kohen can eat Truma. So that's not a good association. So if you meant Truma to a Kohen, that's not a good association. But there's another type of Truma that you give your coin to the Beis HaMikdash to buy new animals for the karbanos. So those donations are also called Truma. And therefore, it's Truma Salishka. So therefore, if you didn't define your bread to which Truma you meant, you could either mean Truma Salishka, which means that you have a good neder. And if you mean Koyim, it's not a good neder. So if you live by Yehuda in the area of Israel that belonged to Yehuda, let's say around Jerusalem, then Asura, then it's Aser, because they were in contact with monies belonging to the temple, and the word Truma in the base around the area of Jerusalem doesn't mean Truma to the Kohen. Usually the language, the vocabulary around the Beis HaMikdash, Truma meant stuff that you give to the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, if you didn't define it in Yehuda, you meant Asura, it's definitely Asar. Uba Galil Mutaris. But outside of Jerusalem, down up north, it's mutar. Because when you meant your bread should be like Truma, you meant your bread should be like the Truma that you give to a Kohen. So that's not a good association, so it's not a neder. They don't recognize and they don't use that amongst their language, Truma Salishka. That they don't use that language. So Truma always meant the Kohen. So the Gemara, it says like this, Tama, the whole reason is it's mutar because they ain't makirim, because that's not part of their language. That's why up north in Tzfas, if you say my bread should be like Truma, you don't mean Truma Salishka. You mean regular Truma given to a Kohen. And that's why it's not a good neder. We go to Amid Beis. Ha makirim. But if that was part of their language, so now you have a choice whether to define it as Truma Salishka or Trumas to the Kohen. You would go strict. Asurin. So you would go strict. So basically, we said, and you don't even have to go that far, even from the beginning, in your Jerusalem, you would always go strict if you have a choice between Truma to the Kohen or Truma Salishka. We go strict. So we do hold that Rabbi Yehuda holds Stam Nedarim, you go strict. So how could he be the author that says by Stam Naziris you go lenient? Answers the Gemara, yes. You could define the atom. You could split the atom. By neder, you can go strict, and by naziris, you go lenient. The reason is because by a neder, there's no extra stringency if you say that the guy took a vow. Whether a person takes a for sure vow, or whether you're defining it as a suffix vow, it's either way, he has to keep his vow. So there's no stringency. But there's a problem. When a person, we're not sure if he's a Nazir, and you call him a suffix Nazir, then he is in a much bigger problem. He can never become not a Nazir. Why? Because a Nazir has to bring karbanos in order to release himself from the Naziris. But because you're going to call a person a suffix Nazir, so he'll never be able to bring a carbon, because a carbon cannot be brought into the Beis HaMikdash unless you're for sure required to bring a carbon. And since he's only called a suffix Nazir, a doubtful Nazir, he won't be able to bring a carbon. Therefore, he'll forever remain a Nazir for the rest of his life. So we're going to go into the psyche of the person. A person would have never wanted such a situation to happen to himself. And therefore, we're going to always define a suffix Nazir to be light. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda will hold by suffix Naziris, you go lenient. That's what Rav is going to say. Amar Rava, Gabe Kri Kasavar, by the case of the Nazir, we go into the psyche of a person and we say whatever that the doubt would be more stricter than being a Vadei Nazir, a person would have never wanted this to happen to himself. Nobody wants to be called a Nazir suffix. Why? The Iligabi Nazir Vadei, if someone is called a for sure Nazir, Megaleach, maybe carbon benechel. Basically, you can do the whole procedure, which also requires you to razor blade your whole body and razor blade your head. And therefore, first of all, you're over Allah, but the Torah gave you permission to razor blade your body and bring carbonis, and then you release yourself from this Naziris. Al Sveika, but if we would call this person a doubtful Nazir, Loi Matzi Megaleach, he can never release himself from this Nazir. So therefore, we would never want somebody to go into that situation where we would call him a doubtful Nazir. So therefore, that's what he never had in intention. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda will go lenient and say, by suffix Nazir, we never met the guy who made that Nazir, who never wanted you to call him a suffix Nazir, and therefore we go lenient by Nazir. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yehuda LaRava. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yehuda said to Rava, Amar, if a man said, Hareini Nazir Oila Mai, there's sometimes when you compare a suffix Nazir to a Vadei Nazir, yes, a Vadei Nazir is for 30 days and then you get released from it. A suffix Nazir is forever. But when you compare a Nazir Oilam, if a man said, I will be a Nazir Oilam, if the Kri had such and such, if it had 100 kur, so basically you're going to call him a suffix Nazir Oilam. He's a Nazir forever. When you compare a Nazir forever to a suffix Nazir forever, they're both the same. And yet, Rabbi Yehuda will go lenient. There's no extra strictness for a Nazir, suffix Nazir over a Nazir Vadei in that case. What was your whole basis why saying Rabbi Yehuda says suffix Nazir, you go lenient? Because nobody wants to be a suffix Nazir because it's more stricter to be a suffix Nazir than a for sure Nazir. But here, in the scenario that he would say, Hareini Nazir Oilam, there's nothing more stricter being a Vadei Nazir and a suffix Nazir. And yet, Rabbi Yehuda, you're saying, would go lenient in that case. Amalei. So the Rabbi answered, Nazir Oilam name sveika chame b'Vadei. But if someone says, I'm a Nazir Oilam, I want to be a Nazir for the rest of my life, still, if you call somebody a suffix Nazir Oilam, there's more of a strictness by a suffix Nazir Oilam than a regular Nazir Oilam. So the ilu vadai, if a person says, I want to be a Nazir for the rest of my life, so then there are leniencies. If his head gets too heavy, mekel batar or maybe shalosh behemish, we give him the permission to, take a razor blade, release yourself temporarily from your naziris and bring the carbonis. But if you're a suffix, if you're a suffix, you can never bring carbonis, so you can never have the leniency as when it gets too severe on you to release yourself temporarily. So therefore, nobody wants to become a suffix Nazir Oilam. What happens though? What would happen if someone said, I'm a Nazir Shimshon? Oh, a Nazir Shimshon is somebody says, I want to be like Samson. So then he's saying basically, I want to be a Nazir that never has any leniencies. So in that case, would Rabbi Yehuda say you go lenient on a Nazir Shimshon versus a suffix Nazir Shimshon? Would you say that? On Malay, so Rabbi says, Nazir Shimshon Laitanya. We don't have a brisa that says Rabbi Yehuda would go lenient on a Nazir Shimshon. Could be, suffix Nazir Lahaskel is by every Naziris besides a Nazir Shimshon. By Nazir Shimshon, if he would say suffix, if you put a scenario of a suffix Nazir Shimshon, yes, then you would go strict. Amalei, but Rav Yehuda asked, Rav Ada bar Hava said, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Nazir Shimshon, that even by Nazir Shimshon, Rabbi Yehuda will go lenient. Amalei, Tanya, you got me. I'm back against the wall. and Rabbi Yehuda goes lenient by Nazir Shimshon, and I don't know how to answer it, because then you're left with a doubt. Then you have a back to a square one. That brisa seems to say that Rabbi Yehuda always goes lenient by a doubt, and then our Mishnah says by suffix neder, Rabbi Yehuda goes strict. Rabbi Yehuda goes and says you go suffix nedarim lahachmir. Why is that the case? So Rav Ashi Amar Rav Ashi came to answer and defend Rava. He said, that says that the Nazir Shimshon, Rabbi Yehuda went lenient. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rav Tarfon That's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Tarfon. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rav Tarfon, Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Tarfon says that even if you say, I want to be a Nazir if there's 100 kur in that pile, you're not a Nazir. You know why you're not a Nazir? Because even if you would find out there's 100 kur in the pile, there was a delay between knowing the fact that you're a Nazir and counting up the pile to see if it measures up to your guess. And therefore, a Nazir, the Torah says that you have to be definitively of Nazir as soon as it comes out of your mouth. There cannot be any delay. So Rav Tarfon is the most lenient. Naziris you cannot have any doubt whether a person's a Nazir. Otherwise, it doesn't take effect. So Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Tarfon, Naziris is not given only if you express yourself. So therefore, even if you would count up, it still wouldn't be a Nazir. So Rabbi Yehuda is in the name of Rav Tarfon holds you go lenient when it comes to Nazir Shimshon. So it could be that Rabbi Yehuda will go by other Naziris, he himself, Rabbi Yehuda will hold by Nazir Shimshon you go strict. By other Naziris you could go lenient, and the author could still be Rabbi Yehuda. Ihaki is just one point. My irish nigla vaisha avad. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say in the name of Rav Tarfon that by Nazir Shimshon, if the pile was stolen, then Rabbi Yehuda said you're not another in the name of Rav Tarfon. Even if you would find the pile, you would still not be a Nazir, because Naziris has to be clearly defined according to Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Tarfon. So the Gemara says, we cross out the L over here. It's teaching the power of Rav Shimon. That Rav Shimon always goes strict, and a person by suffix Naziris, even if you don't know if the pile had 100 kur, so you would still go suffix strict. So just to conclude this piece, and then we'll do one more piece, and that's it. The point of this whole Gemara exercise was to answer the basic question. Our Mishnah says Stam Nedarim Lahachmir, and we have another Mishnah that says by Naziris you go lenient. So the Gemara's concluding answer is that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, and the Mishnah that says Stam Naziris you go lenient is Rabbi Yehuda. There is a further leniency of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Tarfon that will even say that no matter all cases of Naziris, you go lenient, because Naziris has a special pasuk that says that Naziris cannot be in doubt. You have to know for sure you're a Nazir, otherwise there's no such a thing of a suffix Nazir. That's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Tarfon. So both could be the author of the Mishnah that says suffix Naziris lahakel. But most opinions will hold, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda could possibly hold that Stam Nedarim you go strict. One more piece of the Gemara. So that's the answer. Just to get up to finish the page. Rabbi Yehuda is Stam Trum Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said you go strict by a suffix Nazir. By suffix Neder you go strict. Hamakirin Asurim Almas Feikel Chumra. In our mission, you see that Rabbi Yehuda says if you don't know what the man meant, Truma Salishka or Truma of a Kohen, we go strict and we say that he meant Truma of Lishka, and we say he has a Neder. Let's take a look at the end of the Mishnah. Also, Rabbi Yehuda's words, or maybe it seems Rabbi Yehuda's words, the end of the Mishnah says the opposite. Stam Churamin Yehuda Mutarim. Churamin, you have the same problem. Do you mean a dedication to the Kohen, where it's permitted, or do you mean that dedication to the Beis Hamikdash? So if you don't know, Mutarim, you go lenient. And so we go lenient. Only in Galil, you say you meant strict, because in Galil, only in Galil, where they don't know Kahanim. Kahanim never lived in the north. They always lived around the Beis Hamikdash. So Keren usually means in the north means dedicated to the base of Mikdash. So you always go strict. But if in Jerusalem, where Kahanim live, so cherem could mean either you're dedicating it as a gift to a Kohen, or you're dedicating it to the base of Mikdash. If you don't define yourself, we're going to define you as you meant lenient. So in the end of the Mishnah, we're saying that stam neder, you go lenient. And in the beginning of the Mishnah, in the middle of the Mishnah, in the verse, in the expression of Rabbi Yehuda, that we say you go strict, that stam nedarim, you go strict. So the Mishnah itself contradicts itself. Answers the Gemara, Amar Abaya, Sefer Rab Lazar bar Tzaddik. Our end of the Mishnah is Rab Lazar bar Tzaddik, who holds you go lenient even by neder. Rabbi Yehuda says stam nar to Rabbi Yehuda asura. Rabbi Yehuda holds stam neder. In Yehuda, you go strict because we assume that he meant truma salishka. Rabbi Lazar bar Tzaddik stam koram Galil asurim. Only in Galil we say stam koramim asurim because they weren't familiar with chermei kahanim. But if you have a doubt whether you should go strict or lenient, let's say in Yehuda, with koramim can mean you're gifting it to the Kohen living around the base of Mikdash in Jerusalem, or you're dedicating to the base of Mikdash. Rabbi Lazar bar hold, you go lenient. So there is a new opinion that we didn't even see before, that even by neder you would go lenient. That is the opinion of Rabbi Lazar bar Tzaddik. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon hold you go strict by nedarim, and then we saw finally that when it comes to Naziris, there's an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Tarfon that's by Nazir you go lenient also as well. Okay.